And we are live. Hello, and thank you everybody who's joined us today in the latest of Thrive's webinar series. Today's theme is centered around delivering a smooth LMS implementation and migration for an SME, but not just the implementation itself, but understanding the process of selecting a new provider, how a business case was presented, and ultimately how Rajapack UK came about selecting Thrive. And I'm delighted to say we're joined today by Emily Goss from Raja UK, who recently went through that process of implementing Thrive for her business. So before we hear from Emily, I just want to welcome anybody listening to ask questions directly in the chat space throughout today's conversation, and I'll make sure we get through as many of them as possible. So without further ado, Emily, would you like to introduce yourself and perhaps a bit of a background into your career today and your role at Raja?
Afternoon, everyone on that call. Hopefully everyone's managed to stay dry this morning. So I am HR and CSR Director at Raja UK. I've been with the business for about 4 years now. So I've actually not been in HR that long. So I think it's just coming up to 10 years since I took voluntary redundancy from working in food retail management with Waitrose, who I kind of spent 20 years of my career with. This will be the second LMS that I've implemented. We had one obviously before Thrive, but the second time I've worked with Thrive on the basis that I believe they're still the current provider of my previous employer, City Plumbing. So a bit of a journey, yeah.
Fantastic. Great to see people use us more than once as well. It's quite a common theme that we get of people coming back and using Thrive in a new place of work. So that's always great to hear. So I think when we talk about the process of switching providers, it's easy to jump into demonstrations, talk about budgets, but I think it all really begins with understanding that there needed to be a change in the first place. Mm-hmm. Can you let us know what was the kind of driving force behind you implementing that change and pushing for a new provider?
Yeah, so over the last couple of years, we've really changed the way we look at learning and development in Raja. So we've set up a Raja Academy, which is lots of face-to-face workshops, because we're quite a small player in the packaging industry, and it's really important that we kind of grow our own talent from within. I'm really hot that we do a lot around if there is a potential promotion, we advertise internally first. So for me, picking the right learning platform was all about that journey and career mapping for our team and creating that space where someone can learn and grow with us, but in a way that suits them.
Yeah.
So Thrive kind of offered that a bit extra to I guess our previous platform was very much, we use it for compliance and that is it. And with more and more people coming into the workspace who are really comfortable in the digital space and really used to using social media and liking and sharing content and all that kind of stuff, we were looking for something that fitted into that mentality and was a bit more of a grown-up transition for us.
Brilliant. So you've effectively understood why you need to change, and you've talked there a lot around development, internal promotions. I'm sure retention played a part in that. So did that become kind of the basis of the business argument to changing providers? And is that what you kind of went to the business with to say, okay, we can deliver on completions and compliance, but are we doing the best to promote from within and look at the talent that's in the organization? Was that the basis of the business case?
Yeah, so I guess from a Raja perspective, every other year we do an engagement survey, and we have lots in there around our learning and development offering and whether we're doing a good enough job of that. And something that came out of that was that our e-learning platform could be more engaging. So I guess from one perspective, you've got, are we as effective as possible in our talent and succession planning strategy? But then from the other perspective, you've got actually, when you look at what our employees are looking for, are we giving them that support in a way that is value adding and meaningful to them? So it kind of a two-pronged attack of being more efficient and effective as a business, but also giving a business what employees are asking for.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I suppose it wasn't just your team looking at it and saying, okay, holistically, we need to improve how we do this. It was actually a case of speaking directly to the end users stroke employees and saying, what is it you want to achieve? So that's probably quite interesting for your business to then action that and say, this is what our people are asking for. So how did the business itself react to you going forward and saying, okay, we may need to spend a little bit more money, but it will deliver against what our people want to have?
So we found a creative way of dealing with that. It might cost us a bit more. In that, actually, when we entered into a conversation with Thrive, we sat right at the bottom of one of the subscription packages, which made the decision quite a big one for us to make in terms of the financial piece.
Yeah.
But we are a group, and therefore I managed to go through my own business case with Moreplan, our sister company in the UK, and you were kind enough to jump on some calls and give them demonstrations and get them as passionate about it as we were. So for those guys, they didn't have a current learning management system. So actually, it was quite challenging in the beginning to get them bought into what can an LMS provide, how much work will it be. They've got a different demographic of workforce to ours. Yeah. Similar challenges around what's being asked for in the engagement surveys. But that gave us a real into the business around, we're going to get a lot more functionality. There's lots more support in terms of communication, the way we deal with events and workshops and blending face-to-face learning with e-learning and creating pathways. It is going to cost us a little bit more, but actually we can also bring our sister company on board and create a bit more synergy in the UK.
Perfect. That makes complete sense, but I'm sure that came with its own unique challenges as well.
Yeah, so as I'm sure there will be people on the call listening thinking, actually it's really challenging when you've got a small team. So my team is me, a HR advisor and an internal trainer. And we cover end-to-end HR, so payroll, ER, learning, literally every element of HR. Moreplan, they only have a HR manager. So actually, it's the time and resource that you can dedicate to getting the most out of your investment that then becomes the challenge. Particularly as none of us are particularly technically astute. And actually, from my own perspective, one of the things I've loved about the implementation process is I feel like I've learned a lot too, and definitely pushed myself out of my comfort zone.
And I suppose that brings me on to the next point, really, when you do go from a kind of platform that was sort of self-serve, but didn't have too much functionality. It was more around the completion of e-learning, to something that you now all of a sudden do have the option of having skills and comms and all these different functions. How did you find the implementation and I suppose the getting up to speed with Thrive's team throughout that journey?
I genuinely cannot speak more highly of the team at Thrive and the way that we were supported. And I don't think we made it easy for them. So myself, Sarah and Hazel, the kind of implementation team, are very different characters. I'm very much a learn by having a go. Often don't think things through properly, but learn from my own mistakes. Hazel and Sarah are much more, their attention to detail is much higher than mine. They like to have a really thorough and robust plan and be able to see exactly where we're going and step by step. Beth, our project manager, and JP, who supported our implementation, actually really understood the difference in our characteristics and how to bring out and make us quite a cohesive team, if that makes sense. And the always being on hand when we got stuck was incredible. So I know I pinged JP a couple of times with, I'm really struggling with this, and the response time and the clarity of answer is incredible. My last system was plug, play, off you pop. Yeah. Whereas this very much, I feel like we've had to build a really quite a personalized experience from we've been able to brand it, create our own thumbnails and graphics and all of that kind of stuff. But the content hub from Thrive and the support and the videos and the how-to guides for doing all of those things is exceptional. So building out our homepage and being able to be really considered around creating audiences for new starters. So new starters get that top reel that you're showing on the screen right now, Ryan, with kind of how-to guides and what their first interactions with the platform look like. Then the next row down, training assigned to you, is where we automatically feed in everyone's compliance training. We've then been able to build a carousel of content you might like is based on whether you are tagged as a manager or a non-management employee and what you therefore may be interested in. And then you won't have it. You've got latest releases, but for somebody who is no longer a new starter, they have a reel of content, which is content that's been viewed, liked, or commented on by other people within their structure of within their hierarchy structure. So people with similar jobs that may therefore like similar content. And that for me is totally different to what we had before. What we had before was very much just, here's your compliance training. You've done it or not.
What has been the reaction from, I know you haven't used the platform for too long, so it's quite early in the journey, but looking at some of your reporting earlier, the level of completions is really high. But what has been the feedback from the employees in terms of user experience, suddenly having something a lot more branded and intuitive to who they are and their interests?
Yeah, so they've all, finding content is a lot easier. That the campaigns that we run across the top, so we're changing those every month. We've mapped out what across the year. So we've got a lot of focus on our sales team in the run up to peak. So that putting the customer on the team and all of the content that sits behind that, we've kind of gone through. And it's a really easy way of the sales team going, right, this will support what you're going through in workshops and the other training and coaching that we're currently offering to the business. We've had... it's great to see people being able to comment, like, and share. So if I run a workshop, the content is put on Thrive, and then I add the delegates so that they can see, actually, this is the content that Emily went through with us, and a few people then have asked questions off the back of it. It's really nice that we've had people come up to me and say, actually, we can see that it isn't just Thrive's content. We're able to upload, then we've got quite a lot of TED Talks or videos that we use in training on there. People can suggest, can you add this? I found this really interesting. Could you put that on Thrive? And I'm really excited about getting to the place where anyone can upload content for themselves. Because we've chosen to keep it quite small until people have got used to the platform. But I'm hoping in the new year we can start broadening the functionality a bit more.
So I suppose you've got that adoption phase at the moment. The surveys you mentioned earlier, which came back with the feedback, we want to do more self-development, and that led you to Thrive. Will Thrive's current platform then be part of any future surveys you do, and asking the question, what would you like to see on the platform?
Yeah, so when we launched in the business, we actually posted 3 questions on there. So what's your first impressions? I think because we soft launched, we only had a couple of responses. Our plan is in the new year to put back up the questions from our launch of how are you finding Thrive? What other content would you like to see? And any other feedback. And we've currently got our employee forum are actually canvassing their teams at the moment for what developments would you like for both Thrive and the Raja Academy in the kind of downtime that the HR team have between now and the end of year. So the Raja Academy face-to-face workshops stop for us now as we gear up to peak, which means we've got more time to invest in Thrive as a platform and how we kind of interweave everything over the next couple of months. So I'm really excited to kind of carry on that journey and have that sort of headspace, I guess, to do that.
Perfect. And we have actually had a comment come through from one of the listeners, which says, did you have to do any work to encourage users to engage with the content? We have 30,000+ employees, and most of the comments below each content item is complete.
Yeah, so I guess that is, there are some toggles which allow you to say, I've completed this, without then people having to tick that they've done it. And it is really difficult. So I try really hard to reply to every comment.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's helpful or not, particularly if you've got 30,000 coming through and they're all saying complete. But I guess it's pulling out and making sure that you are replying to the ones that you want to see, in that behavior breeds behavior, doesn't it? So if I come back to this one and ask a really great question or say thank you for that feedback, perhaps it will encourage more people to do that rather than make the comment that doesn't get replied to.
Absolutely. And I suppose as well, one of the things you can do on the platform, depending on how big your team is actually have that collaborations piece as well, where content is posted on behalf of a team. So you can kind of delegate some of that if your teams are really big, like 30,000. I appreciate your team a little bit smaller, so you can probably manage that more efficiently. I know when we were having a look at your platform earlier, one of the things you were most proud of, and I agree, I think it looks great, is this explore page, which I think is the search functionality is kind of does what it says on the tin. It's really easy to find content and filter that content as well. But this explore page has got a little bit of everything here. I can see about us, I can see mental well-being, I can see onboarding. The design is really pleasant to look at as well, I must add, so well done on that. Do you want to talk us through this a little bit and what the idea behind it was?
So I guess for us, it was, how do we create almost a library where if people don't know where to start or what to search for, there's commonly asked for an easy to understand topic which you can drill through further. So if you click on maybe, I click on any of them, I don't suppose it really matters. They have then subtopics underneath, which we are gradually building up, because I get, when you first put in an e-learning platform, often it's quite overwhelming. If you launch with 15,000 bits of content, where on earth do you start? So I guess the beauty of starting again with Thrive is you've been able to pare down and really go for, this is the content that we think people will want to see, and then just keep adding it. So our campaigns and some of the other bits that we're doing are us adding to the content that was previously available and bringing new stuff through. But that, I suppose, the biggest challenge, and I guess this doesn't matter whether you are a big business or a small business, is how do you transition an e-learning platform from being, this is a compliance tool where we demonstrate for whatever certifications or government bodies or whatever we need to do, that we are training employees on specific topics, to how do we properly use this as a vehicle for employee development, if that's how people choose to interact with us. Because I think the biggest challenge for us is, this isn't compliance training only. This can help your career development if you choose to engage with it, you choose to search, you choose to comment, you choose to like, share, interact with others, that kind of thing.
And obviously there's going to be an element of compliance that's reoccurring. It could be every September, people revisit, or whenever their anniversary date is.
Yeah.
And then is the second phase of having Thrive in the business to do a big push on getting people on the platform for their own self-development? Because I imagine you have a split where we've got office-based staff with access to a computer, and then we've got people in more of a manufacturing setting, maybe using mobile phones and having less time to complete content. Do you have that balance that you have to try and adjust to at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons that we chose Thrive is because there were options for how we used how we supported people who didn't have work email addresses to still be able to get on the platform. And I guess we are a single site blended operation where we have a warehouse function and support functions all under one roof. And for anyone who's worked in that environment, and the same as the night shift, day shift divide, you get an office warehouse divide where the office team have access to stuff that the warehouse team don't. Actually, Thrive was a really good way of saying, let's give everyone access to the same tools and materials. And then if people choose to engage with it, that's great, and we can encourage them and signpost them. If they choose not to, then that's okay too. So yeah, it's been quite challenging to get workstations in the operations team that anyone has access to and can use without signing on or with a generic logon. There's like operational IT challenges.
Yeah.
But I think the way that Thrive operate in terms where you don't need a company email address has been really helpful for that.
Yeah, so making the platform as accessible as possible. And we've kind of touched a little bit around that decision-making process, what you've enjoyed since you've gone live. That actual day or week in which you did that soft launch, how did you go about A, communicating that with the rest of the business, but B, making sure that, okay, not only do we want people accessing it, we need to start using that straight away, because it's quite easy to get comfortable using a platform, especially with reoccurring yearly training. You see people fall into that trap of, I do my cybersecurity every 12 months, I log in here, and now suddenly you have to change that mindset. Was there anything you did to help with that in terms of launching Thrive to the wider business?
So we chose to do a soft launch and went with lots of posters, lots of communications in our weekly updates. We shared a video. I did some work in the directors' meetings, and then a couple of the managers asked me to come into their team briefings. But with a let's just see what happens approach, to see then how much, because what I don't like people to feel, I think if you force people to do things, you don't necessarily get the engagement that you're looking for. So it was really interesting to see how many people engaged without us saying, look, it's here, you must sign on. And one of the metrics that Jack and I talked about when we were doing our launch plan was what percentage of people have done their profile within the first week by us only sending out emails and teaser videos and the normal weekly comms, because that would then help me know how much training, support, encouragement needed to go into kind of, okay, so how do we get everyone on board with this and show people how to use it? And is that one-to-one pockets within the business, or is that a whole business we need to get together?
Wow, that's really interesting. So you effectively had a way of measuring how your approach was working to the business. Have you had any sort of results, both positive or negative, to date since you've launched the platform? Was it still too early to kind of judge how it's performed?
Yes, I think we've still got about 25% of the team haven't signed on. And they are across the business. And I guess it's then looking at why are people choosing not to sign on? And is it that e-learning isn't going to work for them because it's just not their way? Or is it something that we've done with a particular team that's made it challenging? So we've identified a team within the business where they probably need to be assigned time to do their e-learning because of the high volume, high repeat role that they do for us. Actually, it's really challenging to get away from their day job. And perhaps you also need to create a different space for them to move into than sat at their desk, because they then get drawn into day-to-day business tasks. And I'm sure that's not a unique challenge for a lot of businesses where people go, I just haven't had time.
Of course. I think time is probably the biggest reason somebody wouldn't log in. And from conversations I've had with a lot of different people who use the platform down the years, is sometimes they like to keep it very formal. The HR team or the learning team manage that and has responsibility of it, and a lot of other providers delegate that to managers a little bit, and then they can start to see, do we have patterns between this manager, or is it an approach that suits us? How do you tend to approach chasing people who perhaps haven't logged in, or when compliance needs to be complete? Does your team take responsibility, or do you delegate that downward?
So my internal trainer, Sarah, takes responsibility for, or she owns compliance for us. So she does give line managers a nudge and remind them that they get a Monday notification. So she perhaps shouldn't need to nudge them. I guess it depends whether they've turned off those notifications. And then actually, so I have monthly catch-ups with each of my peers. So talking to them about the way that Thrive has been embraced by their team alongside the other KPIs and metrics that I review with them. And kind of talking about, so, what is it about what's going on for your team at the moment that's making it difficult or easy for them to engage? What things would support your team's development journey as we build out Thrive more? So I guess it's that we kind of take a bit of a then. Sarah's doing a lot of face-to-face coaching at the moment. So actually, the director of that business area has said to her, when you do your face-to-face coaching, can you actually go on your Thrive and show people where some content that would support the feedback you're giving is, particularly if they haven't already signed on, because it helps them to see how Thrive and the content supports the conversations that we're having in normal BAU situations.
And gives that full blended approach as well, which is what you want. So that's really clever to tie that back in.
I think that's easier on the basis that we are quite a small team where my internal trainer has access and works alongside so closely all employees across the business. I guess that would be harder in a bigger business.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have had it's not a question, just a comment. I think it's somebody from Thrive. A great implementation. I love working with you. It's clear to see the impact of your hard work and vision. So that might have been when you were shouting out either JP, but it just says private user, which is just informed me it's from Beth. So there you go.
Thanks, Beth.
And then as we kind of start to wrap up, thank you for walking us through kind of the decision process, how you went about it, how it's been so far. If you could say how you'd like the next 18 months to go, what's on the agenda? Is there anything that you'd like to achieve as a next step or a milestone for the business via Thrive's platform?
Yeah, so me, Sarah and Hazel are really keen to build some really good pathways within the platform that enable someone to say, I really want to develop this skill, create me a package of learning and some tasks and things that I could do to help me develop that skill. So, and then actually being able to get Raja and Moreplan working closer together with things like management development. So where we run face-to-face workshops in Raja, but they don't in Moreplan, how do we bring both businesses together? Which actually I think is really important for a lot of reasons other than just the development of Thrive. It is a vehicle for us to work closely with a sister company.
Absolutely, and bring people into their own individuality because the system allows that, but also having that consistency across the board. So if you want people to perhaps seek upward development, then there's almost a consistent plan to, this is the bare minimum we expect from an individual, and now here's your continued development. Have you spoke to Moreplan much around how they've found it? Do you oversee much of that, or is that fully under Hazel's remit?
So Hazel and I do catch up on how things are going. So we caught up a couple of weeks ago around how do we start building out campaigns across the rest of the year. For us, it's just kind of now working out logistics focus on, is it feasible for us to get people from Moreplan up to Raja or vice versa if we want to incorporate workshops? Or do we have to build out a Raja a Raja pathway and a Moreplan pathway separately? Because actually I'm keen to have as much as possible that we don't have to section off to Raja or Moreplan, but that people have access to all of it. Because I think that's been the beauty of working with Thrive, is through the creation of audiences, we have been able to separate some elements, but actually we don't have to duplicate workload, and we can share a lot of the elements. It's really important to us that we share as much as possible.
Perfect. And I think that brings us to our conclusion. Emily, you've survived all my questions. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
I'd like to just remind anybody listening that this will be posted to our YouTube channel as well. So please do share it with colleagues who could not potentially make it. But just a massive thank you once again, Emily, for sharing your experience, talking through kind of the business approach to implement a new platform and ultimately how you're using it since you've launched it. So thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who tuned in and asked questions as well.